we go into the land.
I'm a ill poet, prolific with the prose black. Bar lifted, y'all don't even approach that. Gratitude to the most high, that's no cap. 100% success, that's a pro stat. Green Jets jersey throwback, my Tim's clean, I mean not with the horseplay, Bojack and so facts. These tough talk youngins should go nap. They not my kids, Maury's no match. When I was 16, I contemplated life's mysteries. It's not no kid riding a 6-speed. Like, bitch, please. Even my misdeeds holy like Swiss cheese. I'm in the Sistine Chapel with this weed. I made history twice just this week. Fighting of Shit's Creek Pete. I'm trying to eat. Make me a plate, but I'll pass on that mystery mix meat.
Oh my God, what is that?
Look, who knew? Spot me in the background like a Blue's Clue, sipping fruit juice. Or maybe a cool brew. I ball out and stick to it like a pool cue. We fly into space with screws loose. Look, don't let the dark helmet fool you. Them shades block a cruel view. Now you confused in a corner like boo-hoo. Have you seen him? You know I travel New York to Pasadena. They call me the impossible dreamer. I water my own grass and make it greener. Rapper, philosopher, live streamer, a widescreener, call me the prime feature. The realest MC, pleased to meet ya. I spit fire through your loudspeaker. It's evident, smooth, gentlemen. Oh shit, he flexed again, notify all they next of kin. I get it in, flipping the regimen. My real lyrical flow heal like medicine. I'm skeleton wrapped in high melanin, plus adrenaline, you gelatin. I don't care who the fuck you think you better than. You can't stop the process, it never ends. Tell a friend, tell a friend. Yo, what up? What's going on, y'all? Ooh. Welcome to another episode of How Billy Sees It. That was a new track. That's something I dropped today, actually. And it's called Can't Stop the Process. And I really love it. I had fun. Found this beat on YouTube, producer named Fourth Dimension. And he said anybody who wants to use the beat, go for it as long as you reference him. So that's what we've done. And I love that track. So, you know, I'll go back and forth between that one and Right Now for the opener on this show. But thanks for being here. And I don't know if you watched yesterday's show with my wife, Sheba. She did a great job talking about her fears. It was her top 5 fears. And she just kind of broke down her fears and the lessons that she learned from those fears. It was a really insightful episode, both about her and I think about fear in general and about how fear shows up and what it does to us and what it means, you know. So check that out. But today we're going to be talking about how to know self. I'm going to do a full hour today, and I'm going to try to keep it under an hour because today I feel like I have a lot. But, yeah, we'll keep it under an hour or right at the hour mark. And I just want to jump in with, like, why I want to do this episode. I find it helpful to start with that sometimes because that's important stuff. It's not inconsequential, the fact that I would choose this topic. I chose the topic, you know. What's my reasoning? I think knowing oneself is a big deal. And I think by the end of the episode, it'll be clear why I think that. But I was taught to know myself a lot as a kid. You know, people would always say, know yourself, make sure you know yourself. And it was always billed as a antidote to problems, a way to avoid being misled, a way to avoid wasting time, making bad decisions was to know yourself, right? But I gotta be honest, I never really got the full memo on what that meant or how to do it. It was just kind of a constant refrain to know self. And, you know, I'm 40 years old now. I know the value of knowing self. I can speak to it. And I understand what was being said, even though I don't think I was ever... I don't think I asked the follow-up question to fully understand what it meant. I don't think I knew how valuable that piece of advice was, and so I didn't really dive into it. But, you know, as I said, at 40 now with a lot of personal, first-hand, direct experience, I can attest to this thing, and I think it's important to get into it, to actually figure out what it means, and to even get into some practical applications and practical techniques to actually figure this out, to figure out what it means. I also want to know it because I also want to do this subject because I've seen so much discourse and so much content, particularly content geared towards men and young boys, where I'm seeing young men and boys talk about themselves in weird ways. There's a concept out that's really somewhat popular in the manosphere, let's call it, the what I call the dusty manosphere, and it seems to tell young boys that their value is something that they have to earn, that they don't have value. Value, inherent value, is a privilege that women enjoy, and that men have to develop something, they have to create something, they have to earn it. This is often tied to material stuff, and it's tied to employment. If you can earn a six-figure salary, let's say, then you can say my value, my worth is here. Check it out. This company pays me 120,000 to do X, and so that's my value. And this is a heavy burden. I think it's a heavy burden, both for the young man who doesn't have money and titles and access and those kinds of things, those trappings, those markers, but even for the people who have it. Coming out here to DC, a lot of people, man, the titles and the positions, the access, the labels, these things are a heavy part to their identity. You know what I'm saying? And it's a trope. It's a joking trope when you're dating, that this is where you date in DC, and a lot of people, that's where the conversation hinges and lands on a lot. Is people want to talk about their work, and that the value comes from that. And I think there's something wrong with that, and I've tried to articulate that in another video, and I'm gonna get more into that here as well. The last reason I wanted to do it too is just follow up on my last video. My last video from last week, on last week's How Billy Sees It, was how to know she's the one, and that was the title of the video. But the real meat of the video was a self-exploration, because the argument I'm making is you can't know if she's the one if you don't know who you are, and that knowing yourself is entirely the first step to being able to identify and find your partner. And I think I make the case for that. So that's why I'm doing this episode, because last episode I'm like, you gotta know yourself, and I try to demonstrate how that's obvious, that you have to know yourself, or else you won't be able to pick out the right attributes, and to notice the right attributes, even, or to even be searching for them. You have to go through an internal search first, to understand what your needs are, what your wants are, what your preferences are, and why, and to take that seriously. So that's the why, That is the why we're doing this episode. So, practical techniques to know yourself, I'm gonna jump into the first one. The first one, I think, is pretty well known and popular. It's meditation. So meditation is, I think, a super important, useful, valuable technique to know self. Why is it that? What is it about meditation that does that? I think that what happens when you're doing meditation is that the goal, if there is a goal, frankly, in truth, meditation is best done without goal, without aim. It's actually a removal of the goals. It's a removal of the aims. But again, that's something you build to. I think at first, just to describe what's happening here, meditation is an effort to sit and be present. It is an effort to remove all of the labels and concepts and words and the ceaseless mind chattering that most of us go through during the course of the day, during the course of weeks and years. Many of us have years, decades of internal chatter and words and concepts, ways of thinking of ourselves. It's just how it was from childhood. We're taught these words in books, and we associate certain words with certain items, and we need to do that. We know what a horse is, we know what a door is, a chair, people, mom, brother, cousin, president. Take any label. We have all of these things, and we're constantly operating at a certain level that isn't super conscious to us. We are processing lots of information, and we are being triggered by things, and thoughts will come up, and memories will take us. We won't be present. I know this. I feel this a lot in myself. The more as I've gone through this journey of self exploration, I've been able to really parse this out with greater clarity and pull myself out, this concept of myself, separate from all of these different thoughts and these words and these concepts. And this is what meditation attempts to do. It puts you in a place where you're in relative silence, I hope, maybe even relative darkness. You remove all of the sensory stimuli. You remove all of the people who are constantly calling your name. People call you, oh, hey, Billy. So it reinforces this sense that you are Billy, and that you are, or if I'm an animator, right? People are reaching out to me frequently for animation stuff. And so it reinforces my understanding of myself, my ego. And meditation is an attempt to come back to a place in a very personal way and be present, and to see a falling away of all of these ideas of self. Because, and that's helpful to do that, because then once you do that, you can realize that you are much bigger than all of these things. You're much bigger than your name. I'm much more than an animator. I'm much more than any single thing. And if someone wants to describe me, they can and they will. And when they describe me, they will describe me based on their understanding, their metrics, their desires, their need, their limited information. And it all kind of makes sense. It's something, when I point this out, this like difference between who I am versus how the world sees me. I don't do that with anger or disdain. Like, oh, people need to know I'm the. People have the information that they have. Organizations and everyone that we interact with will know us in the way that they know us the best they can, and they do what they can. I described in the previous video how there's a whole system that wants to know you squarely in relation to your work experience. Your resume is full of that, and if you're looking out to get a job, your employer is interested in that, and that's what's most important to about you. That's what's relevant. That's how they'll describe you. They don't need to meet you necessarily. They just need to see those words on that page. That's you, you see. And the same is true with, if they go and check your social media. They will organize a sense of who you are, and they will create a story about who you are based on the words in the post on the social media. It's also the case with, let's say, your credit score. There's a whole financial history that will be used in your stead, instead of sitting down and getting a sense of the majestic person that you are, who you actually are. They will use just those metrics on that page and get a sense and figure out, again, in a very narrow sense, what they need from you, or if a relationship is possible. Those are different examples, but like, I want to point out that every interaction you have is like that. No one knows the full depth of who you are. One of the most interesting ways to think of yourself that we don't quite often do, maybe we do about ourselves, is that you are a collection, you are a localized collection of concepts, ideas, and experiences. And from the moment you were born, you have been through a whole bunch of experiences over this thing we call time, and that this is all, that you've organized all that into your mind and into your database, into your sense of self, into your sense of the world. And that each of us have a very different sense of the world and a different sense of self because of those experiences and those concepts and those words. So I say all that to get to the point, which is, the meditation again has this. It's an attempt to, at least for 10-15 minutes a day, to pull those things down and to come to a place of self-definition, or to be free from definition, to understand that you're actually, because when we get there, when you really get to a place of self-knowing, you'll realize just how free from definition you actually are, how bigger than definition you are, and how undefinable and valuable you are outside of these concepts, outside of your credit score and your work history and all of these things. So meditation is a dope thing to do. I used to struggle with meditation a lot because, yeah, as I talk about this chatter thing, man, my mind would just chatter. I'd sit. I thought that meditation was sort of an action to take. It was something to do, and so I'm supposed to sit in a room and I'm supposed to sit um, crisscross applesauce, and I'm supposed to close my eyes and I'm supposed to stay quiet. And so that's what I would attempt to do. And I would just do. I would be focused on doing that, and I would do that for 15 minutes until the thing, the app says ding, and then I'm done. But that whole time it was 15 minutes of, man, did I call my mom? Should I call? Did I do that thing? Is that? And I would just kind of work through different thoughts, and and if you have to do that, then that's okay. It's okay to begin doing that, because that's the other part of meditation, is that it's not about doing those things and getting it right. This concept, because then I would annoy myself, right? I would have all these thoughts. I go, stop, and I would try to stop thinking about email, stop thinking about work, and I would try to get upset at I would try to remove stuff. I would try, and when you try, you can't help but reinforce. You're bringing something back. Meditation is it's not something to do. It's an experience. It's a process, and it's a practice. And over time, um, I've become better at really releasing all these things, like I'm saying, um, and being comfortable in the quiet, being comfortable in the unknowing, being comfortable in um, emptying the mind of these things. Super key. Um, when I first started meditation, I likened it to prayer, because I was, um, raised Christian, and prayer to me had a similar thing. Prayer was another thing I needed to do, and I would do it alone, and I would sit in my room, and I would, clasped hands, closed eyes, and I was, suppose I was in communion with God, right? According to the Christian understanding of prayer. But even when I was doing it, man, first off, quite often it was always a request. It was something I needed. I was praying because I had some observation of lack and I wanted to ask God about it, or some confusion I wanted to ask God about. I think that these two things kind of overlap, but I would say in both cases you can meditate and pray, and without using words like wrong, because I don't want to say something is wrong, but I can say that you can continue to bring your concepts and your worldly words and thoughts into the prayer, into the meditative state, and that this can be an obstacle to bringing down the stuff that we're describing. So to be aware of it that way, that I'm not performing a set of things. I am trying to engage and observe and be, and commune with the divine, which is free of concepts. You know what I'm saying? Um, come back to myself. Sheba says meditation is like observation, noticing what comes up when it's quiet. Yes, yes. See, but even like I'm saying, it took me a while to even get to a place of quiet. It took me years to get to a place of quiet, which is why I didn't really like meditation very much. And which is why I'm going to move on from here, because meditation is the first one I brought up because it's sort of well known, but it's not my favorite technique. Um, what is my favorite technique is the next part. The next one is deep observation, yo. This is interesting because unlike being in a quiet, dark room and coming to this state of stillness. Deep observation means I'm out in the world or I'm in my living space, and I'm hyper observation. I allow for hyper observant. I allow myself to notice what I'm doing and how I'm doing it. Sometimes I do it after. Sometimes it's best to not do this in the moment. In the moment, I try to be in the moment. I always try to be in the moment. That's key. Whether it's, I think that it's possible to be in the moment, like I said earlier, like in a state of acceptance with and convening with the now and with the brilliant state of reality, um, just in life, without being in a room, in a dark room, meditating. I can observe how I move. How do things trigger me? Where do my anxieties arise? And why? So if I'm present in the moment for it, that's key. But what I can do is later on, I can observe my day, okay, and be honest about my day and take a look. And when something happens in the moment, even if I'm present in the moment, I can register it. I can pause for a second and say, all right, put that, you know what I'm saying? Maybe take the phone out and WhatsApp myself and remind myself about a feeling that I just had or an observation I've made about myself. Always about self. I got an interesting story I told before. When I worked at CNN, one of the things I did fairly often was on Fridays, I would drive in and I did a cartoon thing with Jake Tapper. And I would do this cartoon. And most days I come in, we had to be there at 11, but you could fudge it a little bit. No one was really checking for you till afternoon. But for Fridays on this thing, I needed to be there on time because I'm doing about 2 hours of drawing with Jake Tapper, right? So, and I take pride on being early to stuff, on time on stuff. This one time, I need to be there at 11, and I'm leaving my house at 11, and it takes me about a half hour to get there, right? So I'm like, shit, I'm gonna be a half hour late. I'm jumping the whip. I'm speeding through. I get on the highway. I gotta get on 295 and get over to the DC bureau. And there's traffic everywhere, yo. And there's traffic, and I have constructed this whole thing in my mind, and I'm really upset about the traffic and about the lateness and about, I've visualized myself getting into CNN, getting there and having this room, because it's this big room with all the other producers, and I'm going to come in late and Jake's going to say something, and there's an added weight too. I'm going to be honest. I've told this story before. I've never added this. In my mind, I'm one of the few black people at CNN, and I know how lateness is like this stereotype for blackness. I'm carrying this on me too. I'm like, that's why I like being on time is I don't want to to be the living embodiment of the stereotypes that I imagine are going on in the minds of people, right? This is all in my head. So I'm swerving through and I'm trying to get through, and this one guy is cutting me off, and I'm pissed, and I'm honking my horn, and I'm screaming things at him. Another person's moving too slow because of the traffic, and I'm like, come on. And I'm also trying to text. I'm also dangerously trying to text the producers at CNN to let them know that I'm going to be late, and I tell Jake. But eventually I get there, I park, I get to the parking lot and the garage, and I park, I get up the elevator, and when I get there, Jake is late. So I end up being about 20 minutes late. Jake ends up being 40 minutes late, right? So it didn't matter at all. I was not late. There was no one waiting for me. That story I envisioned of Jake waiting for me, or for the producers, or all this stuff, all of that stuff was a construction in my own mind, And it was helpful to notice that. Why? Because that's who I am. It's important to have these deep observations about who you are and how you show up in the world. And I think part of the thing with knowing yourself is like a radical acceptance of what is, because that's what is. That's who you are. That's what you do. So if I'm honest about it, when I was driving through and swerving, and not only did I have a made up story, I became the problem. I became someone who was more likely to get into a car accident because of the nerves, the story that I had. I had an elevated heart rate. I had elevated breathing, and I was very upset, and it was entirely me. And that's super key to understand, um, because I could go the rest of that day, the rest of the week, rest of my life, never registering that story, never realizing, how absurd and emotional, and irrational it was to behave that way, to be screaming in a car at other people who can't hear me. I'm the only person who can hear myself, and to be doing all these things, um, and creating a hazard on the road. And that I have this propensity, this potential to create anxieties in myself based on my own stories. Uh, it, like I said, you go through the day in life, and you can just never tell that story properly. You can never internalize a full sense of what was going on. You know, Sheba says you are super creative, so you can create really intriguing, compelling stories about the world that you sometimes turn inward. Yes, that's actually true. That's actually true. And yeah, my creativity probably adds to it. But I'll say I've seen people act this way. You bumped into people who are going through something, and or at the grocery store. It's like, sheesh, you got an issue that is not related to what's happening right now. Um, does that person know themselves? Do you know yourself? So oftentimes we can notice this in other people. We see other people behaving irrationally, or other people projecting, and we see it and we don't like it, but we struggle to have that same awareness about our own selves. And so know self, really know self, know how you're showing up. Another story, a similar story, well, another story related to projections that helped me understand myself, um, is I've told this story where I was on a double date several years ago. I was on a double date, girlfriend and this other couple, um, and my girlfriend and the girl on the other couple start talking about RuPaul's Drag Race. They start talking about the most recent RuPaul's Drag Race. That they're excited about this and that. And I'm someone who has watched RuPaul's Drag Race. I watched RuPaul's Drag Race several seasons. I'm familiar with the show. I think it's an incredible show. I think it's a creative show, and you see a lot of talented people in that show doing a creative thing under pressure, being creative. It's actually pretty legit. Um, but on that date, several years ago, maybe, I don't know, 10 years ago, I knew that I could not join the two women in this conversation about RuPaul's Drag Race, right? I had just met Son, the dude, for the first time. And I knew that I needed to project something more masculine than RuPaul's Drag Race. And so instead of joining in like a basic conversation that I would have had with my girlfriend anyway, I avoided that altogether and started a conversation with Son about the NFL and about football, and we had a great combo. And I can do that. This was a way that I navigated the social space, um, and we had a conversation. We had a great. The whole night was great and all that stuff. And again, this is another one where I could have not learned the lesson. I could have gone home and it was a good night. Yeah, it was great. It was cool. We got drinks. Those are cool friends. Who am I though? Oh, I'm someone who his identity, his masculine identity, is maybe not entirely tied up, but to some degree tied up. I don't feel comfortable sharing what I know about something related to the LGBTQ community, or RuPaul's Drag Race, which is of course, an LGBT um, content. I needed to be masculine for this person. I was willing to subdue my own truth, in order to present the most masculine, heterosexual, heteronormative um, presentation for this stranger. And once I put it in that context, once I was able to contextualize it like that, and notice who I am and how I operate, I was able to. First, I didn't like it. I didn't like it. It was a little tough to realize that because I like to think that I'm a bit more self-defined than that, even 10 years ago, but I wasn't. And it wasn't until after realizing, incorporating that as a truth, that I got to see um, myself. And I didn't notice it so much at the time. I just did what I did. But that reflection afterwards, that deep observation allowed for that. But I had to look at the world, look at the experience, look at the night, and take a clear look at myself sort of outside of self, you know? Because again, I can come up with a million justifications and rationalizations for that. And yeah, maybe it made sense, and maybe it made sense because dude needed to talk, and you know they talk about whatever, he's not into RuPaul. Who knows? Who knows? You know, but these are all rationalizations I can have. The truth is that you know I was just as familiar with the show as they were, and I played a different role to intentionally perform something. That was a big eye-opening moment of self-awareness for me. Sheba says, "Wow, yeah, it's way easier to see something in others than in ourselves." Absolutely. We see stuff in others all the time. We love seeing stuff in others. We bring it up. Um, we critique, we judge, we mock. But in ourselves, we have all the texture in the world, have all the details. We understand fully. It makes, oh yeah, well, yeah, this person did that, and they were terrible for that, and they're lazy for that, and they're out of pocket. But you know, you had some other things going on, and you've got childhood traumas, and you had stress, and you have a bunch of different things that it makes more sense for you. So that kind of hypocrisy, and I'll get to this later, but that kind of hypocrisy, that kind of self-delusion, call it what it is. Call it what it is so that you can go through the process of seeing value in dealing with it. And when I say deal with it, I mean to engage with it. I don't mean to rid of it. There's a lot of stuff about killing the ego and other stuff like this. And that's just the word kill is such a powerful word, and it resonates. But more than destroying or changing something, the first step is to actually know. That's all we're talking about here. We're talking about knowing self. So those are two things that help me know myself. The other story I have written down here is I told this a couple weeks ago. Is this story of a friend I was seeing several years ago, who happened to be a cheerleader for an NFL team out here. Okay, so beautiful woman, really cool person. We met at a club and we became friends, and we became fuck buddies, and we're having fun and chilling. We're getting to know each other, and we had that kind of relationship for maybe 2 years. But this was in 2008, 2010 around, man, and I think I was in grad school at the time, and I was a personal trainer, and I hadn't done animation yet, and I had those aspirations, but I wasn't that. I certainly didn't have any clients or anything like this, and financially I was in a pretty rough place, and I didn't like myself. I didn't like who I was in my position, where I was, the metrics for understanding myself. I had, at the time in particular, I hadn't yet grown out of judging myself on the metrics of like career stuff, So I had to go through a process of learning through being with this girl for a while. I realized how much I was performing again there. You know what I'm saying? She was a cheerleader. She traveled sometimes with the team. She had friends who were athletes in the NFL and other people, and big money people, and to me it's like, why is she spending any time with me at all? I didn't understand it. We would hang out and we would spend time, and then I'd text her, she'd text back. We were good, but I had internalized something else. I had internalized a sense that something's wrong here. She doesn't really like me. And so what I did was I started pushing her away. And there was this one time where she asked me a question about She asked me, what was that question? She said, oh yeah, so if you're dating and then this other hotter girl comes along, what do you do? And I told her, I finished her sentence for her. I was like, well, you gotta get the hotter chick, yo. You just keep getting, you keep getting the better chick kind of thing. And that wasn't my philosophy. That's not how I really saw the world. That wasn't my truth. But that was me performing a projection. I needed to kind of stiff arm her. I had to pretend I didn't like her as much as I did because I had a fear that she didn't like me as much as I'd hoped. You know what I mean? As much as she did. And I had internalized this thing. So how do I show up? Who am I? I'm the person performing, toughness. I'm the person performing performing that I don't care, that I don't have feelings, that I don't like this or that person. These were all little ways of like, and this is what I'm saying, like more and more when you train yourself in this way, to be observant this way in life, in everyday life, you develop the muscle and the intuition and the senses for it. We grew up where it said we have five senses: the touch, taste, smell, sight. Touch, taste, smell, sight, hearing. That's five, right? It's actually way more than that. It's actually a trillion more than that. And yet, if you're not in tune with them, then it's as if you don't have them. So over time, I developed an in tune nature where I can notice these anxieties. In each of those cases, with the car, with the double date, with the girl, I can sense it. My I have a tightness in the stomach. The breathing changes again. Who am I? What am I performing? Why? Does it serve me? What are my beliefs about myself? Why? Is it true? Um, One of the things when I realized, particularly, well, all of these things are kind of silly, but I would say particularly the double date, when I realized that I was that kind of person, it bothered me, and I started to judge myself. I started to get really upset with myself. And I realized though, and I want to share this now, these observation things are not to be upset at. Being upset at them is, I think, a mistake. It will put you in a mind frame to be less observant. You actually want to be the person who is in tune, in phase, in accordance with what is true. So the point is to observe. It is not to judge. It's okay. It's okay. Whatever you learn through the self-observation, you have to develop a sense that it is okay. Radical acceptance of everything. Accept everything that you learn, while also constantly being prepared to unlearn it and learn new things, right? Because everything is always changing. Everything's always changing. So even now, at age 40, I'll be working on certain projects, or I'd be just chilling and trying to relax. Relaxing is something I had to learn to do and be active about relaxing. Sheba's helped me with that a lot, frankly. But let's say I'm trying to relax or trying to brainstorm some creative idea, and all of a sudden some weird thought pops up where something that invokes fear, like I'm worried about some email or some project or some money or something like this. Just as very recently, I would have this thought, and then I would notice the thought, and then I'd be annoyed at myself. I'd say, "Come on, man, be present, focus, relax, relax, kind of thing." The problem is that telling yourself to relax, being upset at the thing, doesn't rid the thing. I've been able to think of this conceptually, right? Where I'm right here. A thought comes, and I get upset at the thought, and I'm like, oh, and I fight this thought, and so the thought lingers because I'm fighting it. You see what I'm saying in this little thing I'm doing? The thought lingers because I'm fighting it, right? But then what I found recently, what's been really powerful, is to accept the thought, is to accept it. I am not some external thing looking at, my behaviors and my thoughts and my actions and my values and judging them and wishing I was different. Those things are to me. They are also me. And once I accept it, it's okay. This was similar to when I was more of a Christian, growing up. If I had a sinful thought, if I had a lustful thought, it was a problem, and I would get really upset, and I'd be really mad at myself, and I would try to work through my thoughts. This is obviously a problem with me. I have a problem. I'm too lustful and disgusting, and I need to work that out. But that's the wrong orientation. The truth is that these thoughts are you. They are you. These feelings are you. These concepts are you. And the judgment of them is something else. That's a framing and a narrative that causes a judgment. And even if, like I said, so the thing with like driving, let's say, I'm cool with having a judgment about who I am, but then I have to accept it, I have to take it on and say, because that's who I was at the moment, at the very least. Now, if I truly have an issue with it, well, make a promise that going forward I won't be that way. Make a promise going forward that when I drive, no matter what's going on, my goal is to safely get to my destination and pick the safest, fastest route and not be a screaming maniac on the street. That's my goal. I'm going to accept that I have this potentiality in me, that this is something that I do, this is how I show up in the world, that I have this potential to create narratives and create stories, and that this can affect my mood, it can affect my biology. Wow, I'm that type of person. As a kid, I remember even like my mom sometimes would leave to go somewhere to the grocery store or go to work sometimes, and I would conjure up this story about her dying. I've never said this publicly, but I'll just say it here. I have this story, and it would piss me off, and I would get really upset. This is me like 6, 7 years old, yo. I'm going way back in the crates now, but I'm a young kid who, for some reason, my mind took me to a place where my mom's not coming home, and it would upset me and it would cause me sadness, and then it would cause anger, because as if the thought was going to cause it to happen in real life. So I was mad at myself for doing that. And this process would take hours, and I would waste hours like this, And I think we do it in adulthood too. I certainly have, not that particular case, but other things. Your mind will take you off into a thing, and you start catastrophizing. You start coming up with worst case scenarios, and it can take hours away from your life. And it can also, again, change your biology and your physiology. It can cause tightness in the stomach. It can cause heart changes and breathing changes entirely from a construction in the mind. But that this is okay, and that the sooner you accept this power that you have, this incredible power that you have to creatively create that, you say, oh, that's what I'm doing? Okay. At least, I've learned now, I've come to a place of actually coming to a real stillness through that. I can go from a place of a mind catastrophe and then walk through it with an understanding that this is me, and to just relax it through. And so I want to share that with you, because I think that that's super key. That's been more helpful for me even than meditation, even than sitting in solitude. It is noticing the world and how I show up in the world, and accepting radical honesty with myself. So yeah, continuing on the vein of radical honesty, radical honesty is the key. We do this thing. Our minds do this thing where we construct narratives that allow ourselves to feel good about ourselves. So we have to, if you're interested in knowing what is real and finding your best self and knowing yourself, because yourself, you want to know what's real, to you have to come to a real place of honesty, and you have to become a little bit annoyed and bothered by untruths. And I think we don't do enough of that. We like the stories we have of ourselves, and so we'd rather keep it. We prefer to keep those, even as we're being irrational, even as we're harming people around us, um, even as we're harming ourselves. You know. So those are two techniques: meditation, deep observation externally. The other thing is deep observation internally. Um, like I said, you go through your life, and you have these stories. When I was a kid, and I remember in high school, when I first got into high school, I knew I wanted to play a sport, and I didn't know which one. And I know baseball was available to me, football was available to me, basketball was available, and a few others. But did I say baseball, basketball? I didn't want to do baseball, partly because of an identity thing. I had a sense that as a black kid, you play basketball or football. You know, I'm trying to think of other examples like this. What I'm trying to point to here is that my self definition has this capacity of being a limited thing. As I think of myself and I describe myself in a few words, and those words, depending on whatever words I choose and depending on the story I have about those words, those become really powerful anchors. And it's helpful to realize that those words and those stories are malleable, and the narrative you have about self is extremely illusory. It's an illusion. It is not the case that black kids don't play baseball or shouldn't, or that football is a black sport, or basketball is where the black kids go. I don't have any regrets over that stuff. I don't bring that up, in a space of regret. I bring it up in a space of like, stories tell you how to behave, and we don't understand and acknowledge fully the stories that we have in ourselves. And if we can acknowledge those stories, then we have the opportunity to update them and change them and actually have them properly serve us. So even, okay, identity is so important. So I guess to speak to this further, there's a cool story where a good friend of mine and a coworker, somebody I used to do animation projects with, they invited me to their flag football league. Okay. Now, at the time, I knew this person. They were a woman. They've since had a transition, and they are now a man. And I know them, and they're awesome. They're cool people. At the time, this friend of mine invited me to their flag football league, right? So I played football in high school. I played football in college, and I played flag football all over Maryland, D.C., and Virginia. And so they knew that, and they invited me, and I was like, okay, great, I'm down. And so then they sent me the link, and I get the link, and the link is the DC Gay Flag Football League. The DC Gay Flag Football League, right? And this is years ago, 2000. What? Yeah, I feel like I gotta give y'all years. Yo, this is around 2015. And I immediately had, when I got the link and I realized that I was being invited to the DC Gay Flag Football League, I immediately didn't want to play anymore, right? I had this gut homophobic reaction to the invitation, and I had already said yes. I was excited to the invitation, but now that I realized that, the fuller context, my inner homophobia came out. Um, and what I want to say is, this is another example of something where I don't get the true story unless I have a real pulling out and understand. So later I got to think deeper about what caused that anxiety there, what that all means. It's my own identity as a straight man, my own sense that straight men don't do gay stuff or play gay flag football or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, it wasn't gay flag football, it was football. But my ignorance, my fear, my story, my identity created an anxiety that wasn't real. And this is so important. It's related to the other stuff I've said. I went to the Gay Flag Football League, the DC. This was, of all the flag football leagues that I've played at, this was the most professional. The refs were on time. The field was super crisp. Man, he's gay. Motherfuckers were not playing around. It was a legit league. It looked like it was well funded. Like, they had actual, like, water bottles and Gatorade. The other flag football leagues I played at were not that way. The refs showed up sometimes, and there were issues with this and that, and there were all these challenges. But this league was fantastic. Not only that, they had a whole draft. And because I was a new player, they had like a workout where they had people, we had to run routes and all this stuff. It was legit. No other league had anything like this. I eventually got drafted on this team called the Red Rockets with this dude at quarterback. I forget his name now, but he was a real cool dude. The whole team was fantastic, yo. We ended up going to the semis. I had a bunch of touchdowns, man. There was a lot of players. The league was actually about 80% gay, 20% straight, and it was co-ed. It was co-ed. And I don't know where I get those numbers. 20, 20, 80, 30, 70. It was somewhere around there. And a lot of the players, the gay players, were ex-college football players, and this and that, and ex-athletes of all stripe. And it was a good lead, and there was some real talent. It was a challenge, yo, and it was fun. And I almost missed on that whole opportunity because of a story that I have about myself and a lack of confidence in myself. No matter what, like, okay, I'm straight. I go to this gay flag football league. Great. I'm still straight. It's all good. Nothing changes about me. I'm not going to be contaminated by the broader realities of this space that was created, that I was invited to, thankfully. And I had a great time. It was fantastic. And I'm so lucky that I'm the type of person that allows myself to be creative and flexible in my identity, where I don't cordon myself off like this. And so I love that queer people. Sheba says, I love that queer people feel safe around you and want you to know them better. Yeah. The point in this, in knowing self, is I have this other concept called a heat check, where I try to say yes to things. Unless I have a real reason, a meaningful reason, I try to say yes. I try to do stuff. If I have an idea, something, or I've been invited to something, or something's going, like, to say yes, to give it a shot, to go, to not invent all of the reasons, all of the concepts for why something is an impossibility. To believe that anything is possible. And so it is possible for a straight black kid from Brooklyn to come and enjoy football and play in this league, and to do that when I know a lot of guys wouldn't have done that, and they would have missed a great experience, frankly. But heat checks, tests is another way, right? If you sit and remove concepts from yourself, that's one way to broaden yourself. That's important. If you sit and meditate and remove yourself from these broader concepts that we have in our mind, that's one way to understand self and to give yourself the room to be yourself and your full self. Deep observation of the external world is another way to notice that your operations in the world are often rooted in your own fears and your own assumptions, your own projections, to notice that that anger, that anxiety that you have, that you created, that it was self-created. Now, what kind of person has created that anxiety? You know, who are you? What are your presuppositions? What are your assumptions? What are the concepts that you're holding on to, that you're attached to, right? And here, heat checks is another one because you don't know yourself. And if you think of yourself, you know, when I thought of myself as a black kid, I couldn't see myself as a baseball player, absurdly. When I thought of myself as a football player, I couldn't see myself getting into dance, which is something that I eventually got into, which some of the football players did to improve mobility and improve things for football. But I saw that as something less than masculine and something to avoid. Say yes. Test. You don't know who you are. You don't know who you are. When you do this work, when you start to do this work, you start to realize how much you're projecting onto people. There are so many people that I know, and I will say that I know them. I know them to a degree. But as I said earlier, we are each so deeply complex and so profoundly, brilliantly human. The vast number of experiences that each of us have held on to and have remembered and experienced, and the lessons we took from them, and the language we use, and our hopes and aspirations, and how we move in the present. I don't know people. I know them to the degree that I can. I know them to the degree that they've allowed me. I know them to the degree of the spaces that we've shared together, and how we've interacted in this and that. But that each person is way deeper than that. And so if each person is way deeper than that, and I don't know them, I also don't know myself. I have greater texture for myself. I know more about myself than I know about the other people, for sure. But as I said earlier, you know, we have this thing in our psychology where we don't fully engage with ourselves. We kind of block certain things out. We push things in certain ways. We identify. We separate. We say this is bad and this is good, and we find comfortable ways to develop an ego that we like, a story about ourselves that we enjoy. And that ego, that story, is incomplete. Necessarily so. It's just a story. You're too brilliant. You're too vast. You're too broad. You're too large. You're too. And when I say too, I don't mean as though as like too much. I'm saying that you are bigger than the story, and you're bigger than the concepts. I'm bigger than a black boy. I'm bigger than a football player. Bigger than an animator. I'm bigger than straight. I'm bigger than any label I can assign to myself. The labels, even the labels that I feel very confident in, even the identity labels that I use quite often to describe myself, those are useful in specific situations. That those are the best we have. We have to use these labels, and we have to communicate, and we do this in order to engage in the world with other people. That's just what it is. And yet I can always come back home and come back and settle into a deep understanding that I'm so much more than all that. I am so much more than my job and what my brothers expect from me, from what even Sheba expects from me, from what coworkers expect of me. So a heat check is an opportunity to say, oh, this is something I haven't tried. This is something that feels very alien, something outside of self, it seems. But once you engage in this more often, and you get on this process of self-awareness, including those heat checks, you realize just how powerfully vast you are, and how those things can be incorporated. And the anxiety was entirely yours. And the difference, that conceptual difference, the thing that made you think it was something outside of self, was entirely yours. And when you become too comfortable, when you get too comfortable in a concept of self, you begin dying immediately. See how crazy that is? Because that concept isn't real. and you become comfortable, and you allow yourself to become stagnant there. Meanwhile, the world is changing and moving all around you, and people are doing things, and you're being invited to this, and conversations are opening up, and paths are available here, there, and otherwise. A lot of these things could be fun for you. A lot of these things are actually would be serving you. You could find community and love and family in different spaces, and yet your conception of self prevents you from engaging in these broader versions of you, these broader selves, these broader experiences. Because the more you realize this stuff and you get further down this path, you realize that the external is really only a projection of self, and that the external is the flip coin of the internal. So you are really capable of so much more, and you are capable of much more than you know. So those are techniques that I think are really helpful for me, man. I am gonna probably wrap it up there. Real quick wrap up. Meditation. Deep observation every day while living and engaging with the external world. And then the third one is deep observation within. It's the same thing. It's kind of a heat check. Heat check the external world again. I think in combination, if you do those three things, if you engage with yourself every day with those three things in mind, and each of these has to do with honesty and acceptance, you have no choice but to arrive at a different place about self and to know self. And like I said at the top, when I was a kid and people told me to know self and how important that was, I never fully understood it. I understand now, as I've described here. Coming to a place of real self-knowledge opens up avenues of experience and freedom and choice, and calm, because no matter where you are you. No matter what you're doing, you are you. You are free, and you're powerful, and you're capable. And the other part of it too is, once you know yourself, you have so much patience and empathy for others who are also living just as you are living and engaged in this same process. So that's it, y'all. I'm gonna wrap that up. That's the episode, y'all. Know yourself. I hope this was helpful. Please let me know if it was, yo. People, leave a comment. Tell me about these techniques and if they work for you, and how they serve in your life, because they've been super helpful for me. Again, these are all know yourself. These aren't dealing with like changing self or any of the other things. But this is a deeply important, first step towards a lifelong process of self-knowledge, self-awareness, self-actualization. And through meditation, deep personal observation, and radical honesty, radical honesty, you get to this place. Okay, so I'm gonna wrap it up, and I'm gonna play my new track. Check it out. Can't Stop the Process on this very channel. All right, have a good one, y'all. Honesty and empathy.
We go into the land.
I'm a ill poet, prolific with the prose black, bar lifted. Y'all don't even approach that. Gratitude to the Most High, that's no cap. 100% success, that's a pro stat. Green Jets jersey throwback, my 10 clean. I mean, not with the horseplay, Bojack, it's so facts. These tough talk youngins should go now. They not my kids, Maury is no match. When I was 16, I contemplated life's mysteries. A snot-nosed kid riding a 6-speed. Like, bitch, please. Even my misdeeds holy like Swiss cheese. I'm in the Sistine Chapel with this weed. I made history twice just this week. Fighting of Shit's Creek Pete. I'm trying to eat. Make me a plate, but I'll pass on that mystery mixed meat.
Oh my God, what is that?
Look, who knew? Spot me in the background like a Blue's Clue sipping fruit juice. Or maybe a cool brew. I ball out and stick to it like a pool cue. We fly in space with screws loose. Look, don't let the dark helmet fool you. Them shades block a cruel view. Now you confused in a corner like boo-hoo. Have you seen him? You know I travel New York to Pasadena. They call me the impossible dreamer. I water my own grass and make it greener. Rapper, philosopher, live streamer. A widescreener, call me the prime feature. The realest MC, pleased to meet ya. I spit fire through your loudspeaker. It's evident, smooth, gentlemen. Oh shit, he flexed again, notify all they next of kin. I get it in, flipping the regimen. My real lyrical flow healed like medicine. I'm skeleton wrapped in high melanin, plus adrenaline, you gelatin. I don't care who the fuck you think you better than. You can't stop the process, it never ends. Tell a friend, tell a friend.